Serial killers fascinate us because they challenge everything we think we know about human nature. But the story of Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, completely shatters our understanding of evil hiding in plain sight.
That's exactly what makes this case so unsettling. Here was a church council president and Boy Scout leader who maintained this perfect facade while committing unthinkable acts.
You know, when we look at his background, it's almost like reading two completely different biographies. Born in 1945 in Pittsburgh, Kansas, he had what seemed like a typical American upbringing. But mental health professionals later identified some deeply troubling patterns.
Well, those early warning signs, the sadistic fantasies, the feelings of neglect, they were there, weren't they? But nobody connected the dots until it was far too late.
And that's what's so fascinating about this case. He managed to channel these dark impulses while building this completely normal life. Military service, marriage, children. It's like he was constructing the perfect cover story.
Speaking of cover stories, let's talk about that first attack in 1974. The Otero family murders showed just how calculated he could be.
Right, the level of planning was extraordinary. He didn't just randomly select victims. He studied them, learned their routines, mapped out every detail. 4 innocent people lost their lives in what would become his signature style of methodical violence.
And here's what really gets me. While he was actively killing people, he worked for ADT Security Services, installing home security systems. The irony is almost too much to process.
You know what's even more disturbing? During his 25-year gap in killings, from 1979 to 2004, he was living what appeared to be a completely normal life. He was coaching Little League, attending church functions, being the model citizen.
Well, that raises an interesting question. Do you think he really stopped killing during those years? Or did he just get better at hiding it?
That's something investigators are still trying to figure out. They're reviewing cold cases from that period, knowing his methodical nature and the detailed records he kept of his other crimes. It's hard to believe someone with his compulsions just stopped.
The way he came back in 2004, though, sending those letters to the media, it really speaks to his overwhelming narcissism, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And that narcissism ultimately led to his downfall. The whole floppy disk incident shows how his ego overrode his otherwise meticulous caution. He actually asked the police if they could trace him through it, and when they said no, he believed them.
That metadata led them straight to Christ Lutheran Church, where he was council president. Can you imagine the shockwaves through that congregation?
The psychological impact on his community was devastating. His daughter, Carrie Rawson, has been incredibly open about her struggle to reconcile the loving father she knew with the monster he turned out to be.
You know, her story really highlights the ripple effects of these crimes. It's not just about the immediate victims. It's about all the people who trusted him, who looked up to him.
The psychological evaluations after his arrest diagnosed him with narcissistic and antisocial personality disorders. But even these clinical terms seem inadequate to explain the depth of his deception.
That clinical detachment was evident in court, wasn't it? The way he described his crimes like they were just routine business matters.
Exactly. And that's actually a common trait among organized serial killers. But Rader took it to an extreme, referring to his murders as projects and discussing them with this almost bureaucratic precision.
So what do you think this case tells us about human nature and our ability to detect evil in our midst?
Well, I think it fundamentally challenges our assumptions about what a monster looks like. Rader showed us that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who look the most normal, who we trust the most.
And that's perhaps the most chilling lesson from this whole story. That evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides behind a smile and a position of authority.
Looking toward the future, this case has changed how law enforcement approaches investigations, particularly regarding psychological profiling of perpetrators who maintain seemingly ordinary lives.
Though it's worth noting that even with all our advances in criminal psychology and profiling, cases like this remind us that pure evil can still hide in plain sight.
And as we wrap up, maybe that's the most important takeaway. That sometimes the monsters aren't hiding under the bed. They're hiding behind positions of trust and authority, making it all the more crucial to remain vigilant while not succumbing to paranoia. Dennis Rader was born on March 9, 1945, in Pittsburg, Kansas. He was the eldest of 4 sons born to Dorothea May Rader, a bookkeeper, and William Elvin Rader, a Kansas gas service worker. Though the family eventually moved to Wichita, young Dennis later recalled feeling neglected by his parents, both of whom worked long hours and gave little attention to their children. But Dennis's inner world was far darker than anyone could imagine. From a young age, he developed twisted sexual fantasies centered around torturing women he saw as trapped and helpless. He displayed early signs of sadism, torturing, hanging, and killing small animals. He also indulged in voyeurism, autoerotic asphyxiation, and cross-dressing, often spying on female neighbors while wearing stolen women's underwear. Sometimes he'd bind himself with ropes around his arms and neck, acting out the very scenes he would later recreate in real life. After graduating from Wichita Heights High School, Rader attended Kansas Wesleyan University, but dropped out after just a year due to poor grades. In 1966, he joined the U.S. Air Force and served in places like Turkey, Greece, Japan, and South Korea. He was honorably discharged in 1970. In 1971, he bought a home in Park City, a quiet suburb of Wichita. He earned an associate degree in electronics from Butler County Community College and, in 1979, a bachelor's in administration of justice from Wichita State University. But behind closed doors, Rader was still acting out his fantasies. During his cooling-off periods between murders, he'd dress in women's clothing and masks, then bind and photograph himself. He claimed he was pretending to be his victims. Despite this disturbing private life, Rader came off as polite, normal, even friendly in his community. BTK's employment history. Rader's jobs reflected a life of routine and responsibility. He worked in the meat department of an IGA supermarket, followed by a stint assembling products at the Coleman Company. From 1974 to 1988, he worked for ADT Security Services, installing alarm systems, ironically, often for families afraid of the BTK killer. He later worked on the 1990 federal census, and then became a compliance officer and dog catcher in Park City. He was deeply involved in his church, Christ Lutheran, and even served as church council president. He was also a Cub Scout leader. What about his family? On May 22, 1971, Rader married Paula Dietz in a ceremony at Christ Lutheran Church. She was a secretary for the American Legion. Together they had 2 children, Carrie and Brian. But that seemingly perfect family life came crashing down after his arrest. On July 26, 2005, Paula was granted an emergency divorce, waiving the usual 60-day waiting period. In a 2019 interview with ABC News, his daughter Carrie described how difficult it was to reconcile her normal childhood with the horror of discovering who her father truly was. Though she eventually forgave him, she continued to struggle with the trauma. At CrimeCon 2024 in Nashville, she revealed even more chilling details, reading from her father's own journal, which indicated that he had sexually abused her when she was a child. Dennis was a neighborhood bully. Rader's neighbors described him as a bully, especially toward women. 2 women filed restraining orders against him in the 1980s, and another did so in the 1990s. One woman even changed her address to avoid him. As a compliance officer, he took things too far. One neighbor recalled him measuring their lawn with a tape measure to see if the grass was too long. Another said he was caught filming their house. A female neighbor accused him of killing her dog, without reason. His house in Park City was demolished in 2007. BTK's confirmed murders. Otero murders, January 15, 1974. Rader's killing spree began with a horrifying crime. He murdered 4 members of the Otero family: Joseph, 38, Julie, 33, Joey, 9, and Josie, 11. After weeks of stalking, he broke into their Wichita home, tied them up, and killed them one by one. He took young Josie to the basement, hanged her, and masturbated as she died. He later returned to retrieve a knife he had dropped in the yard. Catherine Bright, April 4th, 1974. Next was Catherine Bright. Rader didn't expect her brother Kevin to be there. Kevin was shot and strangled, but survived. Catherine wasn't so lucky. She fought back, so Rader stabbed her to death. Shirley Ruth Vian Relford, March 17, 1977. Rader tricked Shirley's young son into letting him in. He locked her children in a bathroom, tied Shirley up, and strangled her. Nancy Jo Fox, December 8, 1977. He broke into Nancy's home and waited. When she arrived, he calmly told her what he was going to do, let her smoke a cigarette, then slowly killed her using a belt. He played with her, bringing her to the edge of consciousness before ending her life. Attempted murder of Anna Williams, 1979. Rader planned to kill Anna Williams, but she came home too late. Furious, he left, but later mailed her stolen items from her home. Marine Hedge, April 27, 1985. Rader used a Cub Scout campout as an alibi. He snuck away, strangled Marine Hedge in her home, and took her body to his church. There, he photographed her in various disturbing poses before dumping her body in a ditch. Vicky Vagerle, September 16, 1986. Disguised as a phone repairman, Rader entered Vicky's home. She fought hard, but he strangled her and stole her car. He took photos after she died. Dolores Davis, January 18, 1991. Using another scout trip as his cover, Rader broke into Dolores's home, killed her, and dumped her body beneath a bridge. Suspected murders. In 2023, Rader was named the prime suspect in the 1976 disappearance of 16-year-old Cynthia Dawn Kinney in Osage, Oklahoma. His movements and job aligned with the timeline, though he continues to deny involvement. By the 1980s, law enforcement had tried blood and saliva testing and even geographic profiling. Still, BTK remained a ghost. In 1997, FBI profiler Robert Ressler predicted the killer had a background in criminal justice. And he was right. The case grew cold until author Robert Beatty began researching a book on the murders. That stirred something in Rader. BTK reemerges, 2004 to 2005. In 2004, the Wichita Eagle received a chilling letter from Bill Thomas Kilman, BTK. It included crime scene photos of Vicky Wegerle's murder. Over the next year, more letters arrived, filled with poems, puzzles, and even dolls. One message asked police if a floppy disk could be traced. They lied and said no. That floppy disk led straight to him. It contained a deleted Microsoft Word document from Christ Lutheran Church. It revealed Rader's name. Police then obtained a PAP smear from his daughter's medical records and matched it to DNA found under Wegerle's fingernails. The trail was over. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested. How did Dennis Rader get arrested? Rader was pulled over near his home in Park City. When asked, "Do you know why you're going downtown?" he responded, "Oh, I have suspicions why." Investigators searched his home, car, church office, and even the Park City Library. They found computer equipment, black pantyhose, and other disturbing evidence. The next morning, Wichita Police Chief Norman Williams made it official. The bottom line, BTK is arrested. Rader asked about the death penalty and whether he'd be housed with the general prison population or in a special section, the legal proceedings. On February 28, 2005, Dennis Rader was charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder. Rumors swirled that he had confessed to more killings, but ultimately, he admitted only to the 10. On March 1st, bail was set at $10 million, and a public defender was appointed. Though he initially pleaded not guilty, he changed his plea to guilty on June 27th. In court, he coldly described each murder in graphic detail, without apology. At his sentencing on August 18th, victims' families spoke. Then, Rader delivered a rambling 30-minute monologue. The prosecutor compared it to an Academy Awards speech. Experts say it was a classic display of a psychopath's inability to grasp emotional meaning. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, 175 years minimum. At the time of the murders, Kansas had no death penalty. On August 19, 2005, Rader was transferred to El Dorado Correctional Facility. Police scoured cold cases in Kansas and neighboring states. They focused especially on murders after 1994, when Kansas reinstated the death penalty. No new murders were linked to Rader, but investigators believe he stalked many other potential victims. Rader admitted as much, saying, "There are a lot of lucky people." Psychological evaluation. Psychologist Robert Mendoza evaluated Rader for an insanity defense. He diagnosed narcissistic, obsessive-compulsive, and antisocial personality disorders. Rader showed a grandiose sense of self, a craving for admiration, a need for rigid control, and no empathy. A videotaped interview from the session later aired on NBC's Dateline. Rader wasn't supposed to know it might be televised. Kansas's Attorney General sued the evaluator for breach of contract, and in 2007, the case settled for $30,000. What was the aftermath? On the 40-minute ride to prison, Rader chatted about the weather until victim impact statements aired on the radio. Then he cried. He remains in solitary confinement for his own safety and likely will be for the rest of his life. In 2006, the Kansas Department of Corrections granted Rader privileges for good behavior: a television, radio, books, and art supplies. Prosecutors objected, fearing he would relive his fantasies through violent media and news articles. In 2019, Carrie Rawson released a memoir, A Serial Killer's Daughter. In 2023, after visiting him in prison, she said he was rotting and unhappy, reporting he had lost 7 inches in height and now used a wheelchair. And so, Dennis Rader, husband, father, church leader, scoutmaster, was revealed to be one of the most sadistic serial killers in American history. For over 30 years, he wore a mask so perfect, even his own family couldn't see the monster underneath. He hid in plain sight, he waved at neighbors, he prayed in church, and all the while he fantasized about death, domination, and control. It wasn't DNA alone that caught him. It was his ego, his desperate need to be seen, to be remembered, to remind the world that BTK was still out there. In the end, it wasn't justice that found him. It was pride. Today, Dennis Rader rots in solitary confinement. No longer feared, no longer admired, just a broken man shackled by his own legacy. But the scars he left behind, they'll never fade. This was the story of BTK. Bind, torture, kill. But most of all, hide. Until he couldn't anymore.